Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to NAP, Noobs Analyze Pros, where the best Valorant players of our school analyze pro plays from around the world. This year, we're taking a special focus at the Reykjavik tournament, where the Valorant top teams around the world, 10 of them, come together in a double elimination bracket to find out who sits at the top of the world. It is Sentinels, the crowd favorite, going undefeated throughout the entire tournament. But there are many plays, very noticeable, and lots of new strategies that we are here to analyze. Welcome to our podcast, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the 2021 Noobs Analyze Pros, aka NAP broadcast, where today we'll be looking at a more special, in-depth review of the Valorant 2021 Masters Tournament, where top 10 teams come together from all over the world to face off in a double elimination bracket. Who are the two NA teams, David?
Sentinels and Version 1.
And the two EU teams.
Team Liquid and Fnatic.
Fnatic. And we'll be looking at these four teams specifically because our first topic is going to be the NA versus EU controversy. So we had that one interview clip where TL Scream goes, NA is so predictable.
I feel like what they do is very predictable.
Well, there's been some lot of banter in between both of the teams. How did they do, David? How did this final EU versus NA thing come out?
Well, I mean, Sentinels never dropped a map.
I'm just saying. NA is really, really strong in this tournament. However, there's some great performances from Fnatic as Durka.
Yes, my favorite player.
Durka really popping off on some of his games, and Fnatic all around showing that they are a very intellectual and mind game team, whereas NA seems to be taking the more brute force route. For example, in the first couple of games, how many duelists did we see in the first one? There was like one or zero, right?
Yeah.
There was one game where there was no duelists, and one game where there's only one duelist on either side, and Jett seems to be the typical duelist in case if you do pick one. So David, what do you think? Do you think EU's just forever better, worse than NA, or is there just one tournament that NA comes out on top?
Well, I mean, some haters on Reddit, according to some sources, say that the CS pros that failed went to Valorant, but the EU CS pros didn't, so they stayed with CS and allowing like the lower ranked CS pros to go to Valorant, I believe, thus making NA quote unquote better than EU because the skill level was a bit different. That's what I think.
Yeah, what do you think, Dalton? NA or EU?
You know, I'm just going to have to say NA because, I mean, it showed that you're obviously the more skilled team. I would like to comment, though, on how Liquid was very cocky going into the tournament.
I feel like what they do is very predictable.
Yes, the flank's so good here. Does he decide to go for this now?
And as they were, eventually upset, it's that level of cockiness that can, is either great, for example, for Sentinels, they're allowed to be cocky because, evidently they're better. But for some of these other teams who were very good at CSGO and are now underperforming in Valorant, it's really showing that discrepancy.
Yeah. Second, we have the lineups meta in this tournament where every game we almost saw some players playing lineups. And it was, I think, V1 versus Team Liquid, where Team Liquid got sent to the lower bracket, where there was the entire Haven game was basically won through lineups as Viper, Sova, and KJ were all standing A-long in a 3v3 situations aimed at the sky. They were getting pushed from all sides, but all three of them were just pumping out the utility. Doesn't care if anybody's pushing them. And I think it's very interesting because Fnatic absolutely dominated crew with their minds in the first game. You saw so many great outplays, not through gunfights, but through pure intellectual prowess. But then we have here V1, version 1, destroying the floor with EU and their absolute memorization of lineups. Do you think lineups should get a possible nerf here as the utility is insane?
See, I think it's very predictable lineups.
True.
You just gotta memorize them. You know them, right? If there's an evident bomb planting spot that everyone goes for, it's gonna be hard to defend against. But if there's a better way of coordination amongst these teams, that maybe one flank pushes, or if it's in that kind of scenario, there just needs to be better strategies in order to avoid these things because, as we saw, it is very, 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 very strong mechanic.
Yeah. What do you think? What do we do for lineups?
I think just you have to strategize around it so that like it comes to the point where it's not like as it's basically like the only thing winning them these games, right? Like possibly like not just sending all three to like defuse a spike when you know that they're just gonna shock dart,
Shock
Viper,
dart.
you know.
So here we have the clip of the V1 versus Team Liquid. It's the Haven side, I think halfway into the game, where 2 or 3 players are simply standing on A site long with nobody watching the spike. However, all of them are looking at the sky, even while getting pushed. They're just focusing on the lineups. So should the minor regions here get 2, and should some of them only have 1? We saw Korea actually doing remarkably well throughout the tournament as New Turn showed their high intellect of wall bangs and different strategies like Hia, Suggest, Allow, all very dominant players. But Brazil, should they get 2 seeds as Viking and Sharks were dominated? What do you think?
I think because this was the first international tournament that we didn't really know who was like the most dominant teams other than like Sentinels, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But like, I think we'll be able to like take from this experience of like, you know, these 2 seeds being like thrown out right away to like kind of prove who deserves 2 seeds. Because if we had another Korean team that performed just as well as New Turn, I think that would be more entertaining than watching 2 Brazilian teams leaving after like first round.
Why do you think Brazil got 2 seeds here?
See, personally, I'm more of a CSGO guy, and
Yeah.
I know from the past that they were very dominant in CSGO, so I think it was just they kind of had this preconceived idea that, you know, they would do good. It would make sense. It's a very similar-esque game, but, you know, as we can see that, you know, it was not the same. They got wiped.
So lots of interesting strategies coming out, and Brazil, I think they weren't ready for this dominance. However, there have been many analysts such as LS saying that NA often drops off as the game goes on. We have seen the extreme dominance of North America. Do you think NA will drop off as Valorant goes on?
I think maybe if, I mean, with everyone, right? If you don't keep on like practicing to a high level to like a certain degree, you'll eventually drop off, right? Like we can see that like with League, for example, after like a big global tournament where you're performing against top tier teams and you just return back to the low standard which you are playing at, you're gonna obviously stage through that low standard.
Yeah.
So I think if this happens to NA Valorant, yes, NA Valorant is going to drop off.
And do you think NA is gonna see a decline on their dominance here in Valorant?
It depends in that cockiness aspect, as I talked about before. You know, hopefully we'll see a bright future for Sentinels, but who knows? Tens could get that import, right?
Yeah.
Could happen.
And then so Sentinels, actually, well, we're talking about this dominance and you really want to know what happens. And Sen, throughout this entire Masters finals, they went undefeated, 11-0, not dropping a single map. There were overtimes, but at the end, there was no maps lost for Sentinels. You want to talk about that?
Yes, of course. So, as we can see, Sentinels continued their impressive run through the upper bracket and through Team Vikings' New Turn into the grand finals. Fnatic, however, after suffering a one-sided loss to Sentinels in the upper bracket, they did go on an impressive lower bracket run through X10, V1, TL, and New Turn to set up the rematch in the grand finals with Sentinels. Sentinels triumphed 3-0, but Fnatic made all 3 maps incredibly close, pushing the first into overtime. So I'll talk about the maps later.
So Sentinels, really strong. What do you think contributed to their unprecedented dominance here in Valorant?
I think it's more of like just pure skill, more of than just like, you know, like different strategies or whatever.
True.
Like even when Fnatic tried to like pull out these strategies, I believe like Sentinels just like brute force, as we mentioned before, their way through these strategies and just ended up winning. And since the maps, or like all the games that Sentinels versus Fnatic played were super close, you see how like this was like just like the edge of skill that like Fnatic needed in order to beat Sentinels, which they didn't have.
So it's really just a sort of like mechanical skill versus mind intellectual prowess here that we're seeing, where we have strategies flying out from EU, each of them with different strategies, and they're working. However, each team on Sentinels just has such individual power. You see so many clips. We have Shazam's insane finals Haven 1v2 clutch there, even when he was concussed by the Skydog. We have Tens on the Marshall once again, multiple clips coming out from him. And oh man, I remember watching in class, watching these games, every time Tens got a double or triple kill, we'd switch to a picture of him and worship this man. We'd be like, oh, Tens, carry us North Americans. So speaking of Tens, this man has just been confirmed that he's moving to Sentinels for a buyout of 1.2 million. How do you think C9 Jack feels about this?
I think it's definitely a loss for C9. However, I think it'd be more beneficial for Tens as obviously this team is a lot better than his Cloud9 team, as they're actually able to win, I believe. But yeah, I think it's definitely a big loss for C9, as it's probably one of their, if not their top tier player.
Yeah. Do you think Tens would be a better fifth than Sinatra here on Sentinels?
Well, it's a tough, kind of topic to talk about Sinatra right now. He's going through a lot right now. There's a lot of extenuating circumstances around him. So I feel as, for the pure mental aspect, yes, right now Tens would be the better pick. But, hopefully in the future, once these issues get resolved, maybe we'll see a more competitive matchup between the two. And it would kind of be like, a good rivalry. But as of now, I feel like Tens is, better pick. So, Split was the first map that kicked off the series, with Sentinels on the attacking side. The North American side ran all over Fnatic defense as they stormed to a 5-1 lead, with Shazam Khan leading the charge for his team, including a plethora of key plays. Fnatic then finally adjusted to Sentinel's system and strung 4 rounds together to build up an economy that halted their opponent's momentum. Jake Boaster Howlett came out on top for Fnatic with a ridiculous 3K to further dent Sentinel's plans as the European team notched 5 rounds in the first half. Coming to the break, Sentinels eventually extended their lead to a 10-6, but weren't able to follow it up. However, as they were constantly getting caught off guard by Fnatic's troops, which gave them the Europeans a sizable lead to work with, thanks to Nikita Durke, Smirtev's heroics. Things eventually came down to overtime with Sentinels claiming both the rounds in the ladder, going up 1-0 in the 5-match series. With a change of momentum into Bind, Fnatic strolled to a 6-2 lead on their attack, which featured Doma's 3K in an attempt to slip into the bomb site. A couple of back and forth rounds saw Sentinels bag just 4 rounds in the first half. The North American side then picked up the pace and overcame the deficit after giving their opponents very little space to work with the European side struggling to find openers. Shazam seemed to be much more livelier of the two sides, as they quickly hit 5 rounds despite losing Pistol after Fnatic had got away with a successful ninja defuse. The European squad would not let the setback get to them, however, as the combined effort from James, Mystic, Orfila, and Durke in the 24th round saw Fnatic force overtime on Sentinels. We further witnessed the game enter into a triple overtime, though the first 2 couldn't determine the winners. The third overtime saw Sentinels restore order as they won over Fnatic, extending their lead to 2-0. Sentinels had a remarkable start on their map pick, as they went on to add 9 rounds in the first half after constantly changing their setups and going for very aggressive plays. They conceded only 3 rounds throughout the entire half and seemed to be in a very comfortable position heading into the second half. The North American side, however, was dismantled by Fnatic's combative playstyle as they later bounced back with 6 rounds in the bag following a blunder from the first half. Things did start to look scary for Sick as Durke on his jet roll pierced through Sentinel's defense. Fnatic's were on the verge of forcing yet another overtime to their opponents. It was Shazam, though, however, who fought off the Europeans on a close but successful retake, helping his side take away the Stage 2 Masters trophy along with $200,000.
And now we're going to review some of the best plays of this tournament. So first we have EU Flash. What happened there, David? What happened?
I think Fnatic crumbled under the pressure of it being the final round and just, mistakes happen.
Yeah.
But it looked more of a iron game than Masters, if I'm being honest here.
Seems like the flashes of a certain someone we know.
And Ray!
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, that Flash Mystic, don't know what he was thinking. He threw it around across the entire map, and Flash's own team, I think Doma, who was watching the walk-in, and all 3 Sentinels players just streamed in, look left. Doma's there sitting, holding the angle, full flash, and just gets capped, and the round is over. Next, we have Tens with the Marshall play. Did you see that?
Yes, that was beautiful.
So, Tens on the Marshall is absolutely dangerous. Over and over, we've seen this man on a light buy just marshalling and just taking a 1, 2, 3, and 4 off the defuse. And finally, we have so many new wallbangs coming out. We saw the new turn use wallbangs on A site Haven for the Killjoy lockdown. There's a wallbang there now that pros use in short. And we also have a wallbang also in A Heaven short. However, it is a wallbang for the defuse on B site from short. So those are some interesting plays, and there's a lot to learn from the strategies these pros use, and I will definitely implement them in my Iron games. And on our final segment, we have the MVP section. David, who do you think is the MVP of this Valorant tournament?
Well, for me, it was TL Scream. Although TL didn't really make it to top 3, I still thought he was one of the best Sentinel players or Sage players in the tournament. And contrary to one of the messages my friends have been sending me out, Sage does not need kills. Scream has obviously flipped this message around with a 33% headshot percentage, which is probably one of the highest in the tournament. Also with a super high average combat score as well, with him being the headshot machine, of course.
And Dalton, what do you think?
Personally, with the final round, kind of with a clutch, I think Shazam, he led his team with the plethora of plays, like I said before, and he did not crack under the pressure of the final round in order to close the tournament with that win. So personally, I think it was him. He had some good shot calling plays. He really kept the team's morale up, even in the second game when they were kind of getting down against Fnatic. So yeah.
I think for me, it is a big debate between Dapper and Tens, which is pretty controversial because we have Tens. Most people would agree that he's been an influential member to the team and is a new addition. He's an insane fragger. He goes in, huge combat score, and he's really good on the entry. But the thing people don't realize is Dapper is playing with the enemy's mind. You see him hopping down mid, trying to knife people. And Dapper is really an insane Sentinel too. You see his defense on, for the retake on Haven, A site. He's playing Cypher. He gets a 4K Heaven and just drops the entire team against Fnatic. It is insane. So I think, but after all, I'm going to have to go with Tens. He just frags out, and he's got the Tens effect. Everybody gets scared of Tens. He's got a reputation around him. He's just the best player in the tournament, in my opinion. And that concludes the Noobs Analyze Pros NAP broadcast for today's episode. And I think this is going to be one of the many episodes coming in the future. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.